Hajar.
Thanks so much, Julie. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this plenary. I'm so excited for it tonight. We're going to hear a lot of wonderful stories. I just want to first off introduce myself. My name is Michael Hajar. I'm a second-year MBA student at the Miami Herbert Business School. I am also one of the student organizers this year for ROMBA 2020, and I'm leading the entertainment track, and it's been wonderful so far. I just want to do a quick plug. If you're interested in helping out ROMBA next year, please apply to be a student organizer. It has made my time as an MBA student all the better, and I implore you guys to do the same. So first off, I want to thank Deloitte for hosting this wonderful event, and I'm going to now bring it to Jerry Bruno, who is principal at Deloitte, to get us started.
Great, thanks, Michael. And thank you all for hanging out with us tonight late on a Friday night. As Michael said, my name is Jerry Bruno. I'm a partner at Deloitte Consulting, and I lead our equity and inclusion programs for the tens of thousands of LGBTQ Deloitte professionals around the globe. So on behalf of Deloitte and all of our colleagues here with us tonight, I'm honored to welcome you to the LGBTQ Perspectives Plenary, which is always such an inspiring event at ROMBA. And this year we have a diverse and exciting group of speakers whose passions range across the arts, law, business, and advocacy. Before we bring them on, I wanted to take a few minutes, though, to recognize a special day that many of us probably take for granted. This Sunday, October 11th, is National Coming Out Day. And each year on this day, I often recall the awkward, amusing, and sometimes horrific stories of my own coming out experience 25 years ago. Growing up in a very religious and conservative family, I struggled a lot with my identity, especially in the workplace. At work, I was so focused on being known for the work that I did that I masterfully hid who I was. I'm sure many of you can relate. But there's one piece of advice that kind of stuck with me after all these years, though. A good friend of mine said to me, look, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, we're not human doings. Forget about what you do and be who you are. So I encourage you all to take some time this weekend and think about who you came out to be and what you stand for. And then lead with that every day and be proud of who you be on campus, in the office, at home, and in your communities. So from all of us, again at Deloitte, thanks again for tuning in tonight. And Michael, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Jerry. And thank you so much for those words. First, I want to hand it off to our first speaker, which is John Richards from Greenberg Traurig. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining tonight. Echoing Michael's sentiments and thinking about the weekend and also the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I'll call appropriately RBG for the rest of my remarks. I was reading some of the quotes that she had written and were notable, thinking about what I wanted to talk about tonight. And the one that really resonated the most with me professionally, personally, that I thought was appropriate was when she said, fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. Well, why did that resonate with me? It resonated, one, because I agree with it wholeheartedly, but two, it has taken me almost 40 years, not quite 40 yet, should note, to really understand that in my journey, as Michael said, just to self-acceptance, authenticity, and actualization. So I want to share a few experiences and perspectives that I had along the way. And first and foremost, to state the obvious, I recognize that I'm a person of privilege insofar as I'm a white male. I grew up with a loving family in a healthy community, and really every educational opportunity someone could ask for. One of the pieces I want to touch on tonight is that, in a way, it's a blessing and a curse. I'm fortunate enough to pass as privileged, and I know if any of my friends are on or colleagues, they may roll their eyes that I could pass as straight, but it's true sometimes. And I want to talk about how using that heteronormative experience and upbringing and in that privilege in a positive way to effectuate change and be a voice of members of our LGBT plus community. And I'm using plus to be all inclusive and all encompassing. And I'll talk about later, particularly why I say that to make incremental change. So with that framework, I want to highlight a few phases that I've gone through on this journey to ultimately live by Justice Ginsburg's words and come to a place of self-acceptance as a lawyer and within corporate America. And really that first phase, I'm sure many of you all can relate to, was being in the closet, or what I basically can summarize as the overcompensating phase. And there's all different ways or reasons, right? You remain in the closet. People ask you why for so long. Sometimes you don't know it. Sometimes you know it and you deny it. Sometimes you know it, you deny it, you compartmentalize it. And for me, it was really, and again, this is all some consciously, subconsciously, but mostly in retrospect, it never was about religion or rejection of something higher, or even the fear, and I'm grateful for this, that I was going to be rejected by my family. That really was more about, I didn't want to disappoint them because I thought that they would ultimately love and unconditionally accept me for me, and they have, and I'm grateful for it. But it was this rejection or this fear of not being liked, and not being liked, whether it was classmates or schoolmates or somebody that you played sports with, or a fraternity brother, or oddly, the stranger on the street that you really cared what he or she thought about your sexuality. And for me at the time, it wasn't enough just to have one type of friend. The person that you had to be validated by and the friends that you had to have, from my perspective, were the acceptance in the popular crowd, or the decision maker in corporate America. And what does that have to do with being gay? Because I thought that being gay was just mutually exclusive with that acceptance, with that success professionally. And it meant femininity, which of course was a negative thing, in that I then wasn't going to be well received by those people that mattered most. And then the other thing that it meant was just exhaustion, the amount of work that went into trying to be straight. Every song you listened to, how much you used your hands, movie references that you knew but you didn't want to admit, my politics, which of course were socially conservative, the girls that you dated, the people that you surrounded yourself by, all of it was very, very exhausting and calculated to outwardly seem to be happy based on that privilege, and then internally disassociating yourself and your experiences from everything that was gay and working so hard to cover that up. And all of that energy to try to control ultimately the uncontrollable or the immutable, and being outed essentially in my college newspaper, which a lot of people who didn't go to school with me don't know that, 3 weeks before graduation, which abruptly ended quickly this otherwise calculated phase that I thought was going to go indefinitely. And the truths, there's many that I learned, I think from that phase are twofold that are relevant here. And one of them, my dad, and I say dad, not daddy, my biological father, said to me when I came out, besides the love and acceptance and all the things you want to hear from your family that I don't take for granted for a second, but essentially like, wow, you're such a narcissist. Like, you're sitting here and you go on and on about whether or not you're gay and what people think of you being gay and what are they going to think and are you going to succeed, and this all revolves around you. And truth of the matter is, most people aren't thinking about every one of your moves and what that means for your sexuality. And I guess if they are, they probably are gay too. Or if they're not, they're going to move on to the next person. And that holds true, that self-obsession, but also you come to realize that you're not really fooling anybody insofar as that insecurity, the effort, the compartmentalization, the time, the energy that you have to put into that, the lack of enjoyment with friends, to be yourself, or at work, it didn't matter if you were successful because I was using work as an escape. All of this actually made you less likable, less respected, less of an authentic person, which was somewhat ironic because the whole point you were going through this effort for me was to be liked. So moving then, and you could do a separate talk on each of these phases, but going from the closeted overcompensating phase and then moving to the overcorrection. The overcorrection, I'm my type A self, overachiever, so I'm not just going to be gay, I am going to be gay. And I am going to go from working for Karl Rove in the West Wing to working at the Center for Gay and Lesbian Rights and processing transgender name changes in Philadelphia. And I'm going to go from a 34 waist and only lifting weights to a 28 waist, which I still have, just saying, and only doing cardio. No mention of gay to gay friends, pride, gay bars. And then I'm going to get through law school, and I'm going to use my law degree to practice constitutional litigation, to advocate for social change. I'm going to march, I'm going to be loud, I'm going to be proud, and it's black or white. You either are with me or you're against me, using that language in this context, and I just don't have time if you don't understand LGBT equality. And moving into kind of like that activist mindset, which brings some cognitive dissonance at the time. And you would sit back and wonder, as I'm Carrie Bradshaw on my computer, and saying, okay, how am I going to be this gay, liberal, educated person who is going to be an advocate for social change, and then end up becoming a partner in an international global law firm with 2,200 lawyers where you're defending companies? Is there tension with that and coming to corporate America? And then how does that tie back to Justice Ginsburg? The one thing I will say is that I didn't just become a partner in any firm. I became a partner at Greenberg Traurig, and I'm very proud of it. And I'm proud of it because of the culture that we built that's consistent with this notion of authenticity, and it truly is. And that can be measured in a whole host of ways, but you don't have many firms that can say, in the US, we have more Black partners than any other firm in the world. We have more Latino partners. We're second for LGBT partners. We're fourth for overall minority partners as defined by the American Lawyer, and sixth for females. And understanding that diversity and inclusion isn't just a moral imperative, but it was a necessary ingredient for a successful business enterprise, which then kind of moved me at Greenberg and where I am now, and how I evolved to think about Justice Ginsburg's quote, that if you are going to fight for things that you care about, you cannot do that unless you are authentic. And I really do, I believe this. You should be out at work. You must be out at work if that's who you are. I think being out is consistent with what an attorney-client relationship that is a fiduciary one is supposed to be about, and it would be disingenuous not to be out with the people for whom you work, and understand that people will have cultural differences. And I've had clients and people with whom I work that I know take issue for a whole host of reasons with me being gay. But I also know, and this holds true with family, they may not agree with you, but they respect your trust, and they respect, your trust, your candor, and your honesty. And together that can inspire them to be themselves and to be their authentic selves and channel that energy into productivity and delivering great client service. And one quote that I think is important and is consistent with Justice Ginsburg is, true leadership stems from individuality that is honestly and sometimes imperfectly expressed. Leaders should strive for authenticity over perfection, and nothing holds truer here. So the advice in terms of being an agent, right, for social change and fighting for things that you care about, yes, that means demanding a seat at the table where maybe there isn't a seat, to forming unlikely alliances, to showing leadership with success of what happens when you recruit, when you invest in and you elevate LGBT talent, show through revenue the results and the benefit, but do it, right? And this is the key in going back to do it in a way where others will join you. And what I've come to realize, not as the overcompensating person I was or the overcorrecting person that I was, that to make change in corporate America, to or at least in a law firm, and to do all of those things at the table and win the respect and the hearts and minds of leadership and your clients and people whom you work and work for you, requires maturity, and it requires humility and situational awareness and emotional intelligence. And you have to be able to go into any room and know your client, know their audience, know their politics, know the background, know where they fit in the organization, know their appetite for risk, know their disposition. And then, and this is the biggest challenge, being able to go into that room and have the humility and the maturity to be able to talk about LGBT equality in a way that maybe would otherwise have bothered the activist John, because to you, it's a moral imperative, it's an issue of social justice. Why are we having this conversation? And you forget that it may have took me 20 some years to get there, and they may have only heard this for 5 minutes. So to be able to go into a room and say, you know what, I'm gonna talk about this in a heteronormative construct. I'm gonna explain LGBT issues in a way that they understand. I'm going to go into a room in a red state and recognize that I'm not going to say queer or talk about genderless pronouns or say that my name is John and I'm he or him, not because I don't believe it, not because it's not part of LGBT equality, but I know I will lose people in that audience. It will make them disassociate, dehumanize us further and feel like they can't relate, as opposed to saying that, how do you feel if someone at work came up to you and said, your wife should wear some more makeup and she should have longer hair, or I expected her to be a little more feminine, or I thought you were gay. Are you sure you're not supposed to be married to a man? Like, how do you feel when somebody tells you how to look or dress or act in the context of your own marriage? Or if someone says to you, I really have trouble with the transgender community, it's just so hard for me to call my employee John when you used to be called Julie. Instead of being offended by that, I sit there and say, well, I understand. I said, have any of your friends from high school gotten married? What are you talking about? Well, have they gotten married? And well, of course, when they changed their name and they went from their maiden name to their married name at work. Did you start calling them their married name, or did you just say, you know what, your marriage isn't going to work out. I'm going to go with your maiden name anyway. I don't really like the guy. Of course not. Of course not. So using that heteronormative examples, it's not surrendering. It's not being an activist. It's being effective to effectuate something in a manner and getting people to buy in, which ultimately is what you want, in a way in which they understand. So I want to end tonight. And I will say that is really, I think, the key from a lawyer's perspective and a training and a counseling perspective. And I work with clients on D&I initiatives and drafting policies, because it's not just about drafting things, it's about translating them into institutional results and behavioral changes from the bottom up. And the way that I've learned to do that is continue to try to have and work on the humility, the willingness to leverage ostensibly my privilege and my background to effectuate change within organizations and to be a voice of other members of the LGBT community who perhaps can't present the way that I do in terms of gender or race. But together, I don't have any cognitive dissonance anymore. And I really do feel fulfilled and that I'm in the right place and have struck the right balance to drive diversity, inclusion, and individual empowerment. So I thank you for sharing some of your evening with me, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was wonderful. You mentioned being your authentic self to generate positive client relations. That's also what Jerry was getting at as well. And it's wonderful for you two, although you're both in different industries, that you guys are on the same wavelength with that. So thank you. Next, I want to introduce our second speaker tonight is Julie Deloyd, who is the Chief Activation Officer at Melissa and Doug. So Julie, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Hey everyone, I'm Julie. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And just thanks to ROMBA in general for having me. I know especially, as Michael was saying, the student organizers are such a big part of making this happen. So just wanted to send out my thanks to them as well. I know that's a really big job. And for me, ROMBA was a really important part of my business school experience. It's amazing to see how, and a lot of you will find this too, you'll have fellow students that you might meet through this process, even virtually, that you'll find in a couple years, you might see in the booth next to you at the job fair on the other side of the recruiting conversation. And you'll find that years to come, you have this network that's been built from those relationships that you've built. So hope you all will have a chance to take advantage of that. And I know I have a lot of fond memories from my many, many years of being a part of ROMBA in one way or another. So, you know, what I wanted to do today was just talk a little bit about my story, which I know in some ways might feel a little bit like it's a bit of a unique story, but I think there's probably a lot of folks out there that have maybe elements that might resonate with them. So, you know, my current point of the story today, as Michael said, I'm the Chief Activation Officer, which is just a fancy way of saying head of transformation at Melissa and Doug, which is an incredible toy company in Connecticut. For any of you out there who might have young children or are thinking about it, Melissa and Doug has basically the best toys for any kid 6 or under. So buy lots for your friends and family as this holiday season comes up. But to rewind the tape about 20 years, I was attending NYU, getting a degree in queer performance studies, which, as I found out, only qualified me to have one job, which is that of a lesbian folk singer. So that is what I did. And I'm going to try to do a little show and tell here as I talk a little bit about this. So we will, hopefully this will work. All right. So I spent the first 10 years of my career as a touring singer-songwriter, playing guitar and banjo. I played 175 shows a year all over the country. I self-released 5 albums, and actually a few years ago I added my 6th. And what I'll say is from these years I learned a lot. I learned that my life could fit in the back of a Subaru with still enough room for me to sleep. You can see the picture of it there at the top. I learned how the odds and evens of the highway numbers could tell me if I was going north-south, east-west, or whether if I kept driving, I would end up circling back to where I started. This is all before GPS was a thing, by the way. I learned that if you opt for Wendy's spicy chicken sandwich for lunch, you can save half of it for dinner and it still tastes warm. I have a lot of other tips about how to live in poverty artistically, but we can talk about that more later. So, you know, there's a whole story about how I realized that I wanted to go from music to the business world. It involves a spiritual experience related to the Real Housewives of New York. But I will, again, I'll save those stories for another ROMBA, hopefully one where we can be in person together. But when I ultimately did decide to step into the capital B business world and head to business school, I was forced to face one gut-wrenching question again and again. What does a musician know about business? So I was the one in orientation who had to turn to the person next to me to ask what P&L meant. I was also the one who thought Warren Buffett was some guy who was somehow connected to Obama, right? I was also, you know, I was part of that group that people referred to as non-traditional backgrounds, but I preferred to think of myself as a unicorn. I know there are a lot of you out there, maybe not musicians per se, but unicorns in your own way, facing the same kind of question. What does a musician know about business? I did know a few things at this point in my career, though. First, I knew relationships were everything. When I started out, I was able to make a living within 5 months, all because another musician opened up his Rolodex. Literally back then, we only had cards. We didn't even have anything else we could use, but we had names on cards. And he gave me a list of venues with contact information and what they paid, and it literally handed me my career. Second, I also learned face-to-face with customers what really happens at the point of purchase. To the point where when I was up on stage, I could read the room, know who to give more eye contact to or less, when to pass around the mailing list to get the most names on it. And standing behind my table of CDs, I could hear why someone would or wouldn't buy that 3 CD bundle. And I could make changes quickly and see if the next night got a different result. And I loved how immediate that gratification was of making those business decisions real time. But even given this hands-on experience, I still found myself in recruiting circles, including at ROMBA, with companies that would still ask me that question. What does a musician know about business? One company that didn't ask me that question was McKinsey, and that's where I actually started my corporate life. Part of McKinsey's special sauce is that it's made up almost entirely of insecure overachievers. And at the time, that imposter syndrome loomed very large in me. But I quickly realized that I had 2 skills that my colleagues did not, that were more helpful than I expected: songwriting and storytelling. I was pretty shocked actually to find that songwriting and problem solving have a lot in common. And McKinsey and a lot of consulting firms, right? You do problem solving sessions that often involve a big whiteboard and a bunch of partial thoughts that you're working together to try to connect. And in a song, you can have part of a verse and a chorus, and you need to find the concept that will connect the 2 ideas together to really amplify the meaning of it all. And the same was true with the problem solving sessions. When you're given data and an ultimate goal or problem to solve, it was just about filling in that gap. How do these things connect? And that actually took a specific type of creativity to do well. And then when you needed to communicate these findings, PowerPoint decks would often be referred to as storylines. And from all my years crafting and telling stories on stage, I was able to figure out how to take the listener on that journey that they could follow and get them where I wanted them to go. So quite unexpectedly to me, I was one of the fastest promoted people in my class, going from just a musician to manager in less than a year. I ultimately stayed at McKinsey for 7 years. And when I left as an associate partner, I realized one other important thing that I had learned from music: the power of self-promotion. When I first started interviewing with Melissa and Doug, it was for their chief growth officer role. which I ultimately didn't have the right experience for since I hadn't done much consumer work at McKinsey. But they said they really liked me. I wasn't right for the role, stay in touch, you know, a little bit of vagary there. But instead of saying, oh, well, and moving on, I reached back out to the company and I set up a meeting with the CEO and founders. I said, I think we like each other and we're a fit in a lot of ways. So let me tell you about my superpowers. And I use those words literally. And we can figure out together if those are valuable to your organization right now. You know, I said, I'm a strategic thinker. I'm a super creative problem solver. I understand the connection between strategy and getting real people to change what they do on the ground, whether that's end customers or our own salespeople. And I made the case for myself, frankly, not knowing if coming out of that, they would think it was helpful for them or not. But ultimately, they ended up creating a role for me of Chief Strategy Officer, which was a great way to get to learn the business and the industry. And it set me up really well for when a new CEO came in earlier this year, who then tapped me to lead our company-wide transformation. And that basically brings us to now. So, you know, there are a few things that I hope you take away from my story. One, for those unicorns out there, there will be moments that you may not know a term or some business mogul's name, but that's part of what B School is for. Don't sweat it, but ask the stupid questions now. Secondly, and this is for everyone, but figure out what your superpowers are, right? Everybody has them. And start practicing talking about them without apology. So if you're joining a new company, a new team, a new project, talk with your leader or your teammates and say, here are the things I'm really good at, and here are the strengths I want to develop more. And lastly, this is for any recruiters who may be listening, don't overlook the unicorns. We have superpowers and magic. And that's all I have. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was wonderful. I also have to tell you, I actually went to NYU for musical theater, and and then I went to business school, and I went from 8 a.m. tap to 8 a.m. stats, you know, and that was something that was really jarring for me. But you know, definitely thank you for that. That was wonderful. And just to echo, you know, what you were talking about, and as well as John and Jerry, is being your authentic self really helps you. You are you. And although that does sound a little bit corny, that's how you will get to where you got to go. So thank you so much for that. We're going to now segue to our last speaker tonight, Sultan Bryce, who is the head of growth at Plume. So go ahead, Sultan, and take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. Can you all see my screen? Give me a quick thumbs up, Michael. Awesome. So thank you all for having me and listening to me tonight. Incredible to be able to be on the stage with Julie and John. Incredible story. So first, I'm Sultan Bryce, as mentioned. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm here to talk with you tonight about my journey in creating the world that I wanted to live in. And like any good MBA, I'm going to describe it in 3 steps. So I'm sort of unique in that I'm both in a full-time role and in a full-time program, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So since we're at ROMBA, I thought I'd attempt to do the fastest resume intro slide ever, I hope. So I did my undergraduate at Chapel Hill, where I was a Morehead Cain Scholar. I began my career at the advisory board, spent time at Athena, where I came to clarify that my mission in life is to make healthcare more accessible, equitable, and affordable for everyone. And that mission brought me to Harvard Business School, where I'm currently the co-president of the Healthcare Club and the Pride Club, and where I've been able to blend my personal identity and professional experiences in the great honor and privilege of helping to build Plume, the first ever venture-backed company focused on the trans community. We're for trans people by trans people, and we provide gender-affirming hormone therapy through an app on your smartphone. So on a more personal note, I grew up in a small town in rural Eastern North Carolina called Rocky Mount. My family came to the United States in 1991 as refugees of the Gulf War. We're Palestinian. And this is me and my two sisters. It's actually the only photo I have from my childhood. And what I learned growing up in a small community was how important healthcare access was and is. I saw that hospital in my hometown as the center of the community. And as a high schooler, it became the center of my world. I spent over 1,000 hours working at the hospital as an EMT and as a volunteer manager in every corner of the hospital. And it became intimately aware of the fact that healthcare at its best provides care to both individuals and communities. And in fact, it's a conduit for that connection. So I want to paint a picture for you because that lesson would take on new meaning for me a decade later. Some of you might recognize this scene in Washington, D.C. And to set the stage, I was walking across town. It's an unusually beautiful day in August of 2015 in DC. And some of you might know that's actually really unusual for DC. August normally sucks. It's usually humid, but it was a great day. And I was walking across the city from the West End to Whitman Walker Clinic. And I was headed to my first ever gender affirming care visit. I was full of fear and anxiety and excitement. This meeting point of my past and my present and my future coming together. I'd come out as trans in November of 2014. And I was reflecting on this walk on the 10 months it had taken me to get to this point. Been months of learning, reflecting, planning, trying to access care. And at this moment of approaching the clinic, I was thinking about everything that laid on the other side of this appointment. I was contemplating everything that I could potentially lose. My job, my relationship, my family, maybe even my friends, all these things that I cherished. I was also thinking about losing the dysphoria, the pain, the constant feeling that this isn't the way that it's supposed to be. I was imagining relief, realization, recognition of who I really am. And what I realize now is that moment was this incredibly important first step of creating the world that I wanted to see. The step of clarity, of getting clear about seeing myself as I am and seeing reality as it is and was for me in that moment. And so that day, as I approached Whitman Walker Clinic, I had an encounter with a trans woman experiencing homelessness. A woman named Alice, who is well known in the community. She often wrote for Street Sense, a publication that shares the poetry and other work of those experiencing homelessness in the DC area. As I walked by, I saw her and she saw me. Just blocks from the clinic, I felt her piercing clear blue eyes looking right at me as if she knew everything that I was thinking and feeling in that moment. It felt like a deep seeing. I had a distinct sense that there was nothing that separated Alice and me, that there was no difference between us in that moment, just a breath. And as we passed each other and I walked towards Whitman Walker, pictured here, I experienced this expansive time and space intersection. This foregrounded older building was the original clinic from the 70s, a space designed for LGBTQ+ people. This larger, more recent glass building, and I was walking at this literal crossroads of the past, present, and future. And I reflected on what, where, and what Whitman Walker had started for. Its history and legacy as a clinic for the gay and lesbian community in the 1970s was a place for the gay and lesbian community that they felt they needed, they deserved, that they demanded, that provided healthcare access with equity at the center. And that providing healthcare access, again, had this idea of the individual and the community and care coming together, and that bore the fruit of Whitman Walker. And in 2005, according to their website, Whitman Walker added transgender support and medical services. And just a decade later, there I was. And for me, this was an incredible example of the LGBTQ+ community coming together across time and circumstance. Much like here at ROMBA tonight on Zoom, virtually gathering everyone here with this deep belief that this community means something and that this community will move forward together. That brings me really to step 2 in creating the world that I want to live in. And that's to be able to imagine a future by specifically engaging with the past and seeing that the present moment that we're all in right now is actually a prism for that future that we're imagining. And the things we're doing right now, they build the pathways for liberation, for equity, for access, for those in our community who don't have it yet. And so for me at the time when I was on that journey, I sat down in this waiting room, ready to receive care. It was the first time at that appointment that I'd felt cared for and felt safe in a long time in a healthcare setting. In fact, 70% of trans people report experiencing harassment or discrimination when attempting to access care. And I've experienced that. Places like this room, this design, this comfort, provided me with experience that allowed me to actually be more of who I am, not different, but more of myself. And so with that in mind, I want to call Alice into this space and to remember her, to show you her face that I saw that day. She passed last year, and actually it was the day that I found out about Plume. When I learned about her passing, I read some of her poetry, and this line stuck out to me. "I live to live life, fighting the good fight," she wrote. It struck me because I realized Alice, as part of our legacy building community, part of the LGBTQ+ community, is one of many who are no longer here with us, who have blessed us with their presence and their work and their contribution in moving our community forward. And I realize now that the difference between me and Alice in that moment, when I look back on that day in August of 2015 in Washington, D.C., the difference was not just a breath. The difference was the right support at the right time. And that support at the right time is the mechanism by which we provide generational care, that we move each other forward. My ability to access care that day at Women Walker made all the difference for me. It allowed me to stand here in front of you today. And so with that in mind of what Women Walker provided me, it's what we really hope to do at Plume, to stand on the shoulders of giants that brought us to this moment where LGBT healthcare access is, while still scarce, expanding. We hope to be the right support at the right time that can make all the difference. We provide gender-affirming hormone therapy through an amazing trans-forward, queer-centric clinical team. We leverage amazing technology to do that. And we do that in a way that brings everyone we possibly can along with us. I'm incredibly happy to say that today, actually, we took 4 new states live. We're available to over 1 million trans people in the United States. That's over 80% of the population. And we don't do this work alone. Like I mentioned, we're building on a legacy of LGBTQ and trans health access specifically, like Whitman Walker, Fenway Health, and other clinics across the country. But we're also doing it in partnership with multiple trans-led organizations. In fact, we've raised over $30,000 to provide 1 year of gender-affirming hormone therapy for the Black trans community specifically, who can't access care. We've partnered with Solace, Point of Pride, You Are Essential, For the Girls, all trans-led organizations in a groundswell, linking arms together, saying, we're here, we're gonna do this together, and we're not gonna leave people behind. Because this is generational work, and we do it in gratitude to those who came before us with a vision for those who will come next. That brings me to my final step, which is for me, understanding how valuable my voice is. That in creating the world that I wanted to live in, I needed to find and use my voice by courageously speaking, and by joining my voice with the voice of others. Tonight in this conversation and in other places as well. It's a privilege and a responsibility to have a voice and to use it. Everyone gathered here tonight has one, an incredibly beautiful one. So I appreciate you listening to me tonight, and I'll just leave you with one last thing about how to use your voice, and that's to remember to get out the vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sultan. That was incredibly inspirational. And kind of throughout the entire story, I really felt like I was kind of there with you, like holding your hand, like being a native of kind of Northern Virginia in the DC area, just like walking there, like in with you. And it's like so cool, like with the new company that you've created, like how much you're doing for like the trans community. And we just had like a couple like questions here that's gone through the Q&A, and just kind of curious for you, Sultan, your advice just going forward for people that really haven't had too many experiences with the trans community and want to become more involved. Like what advice or resources do you recommend for the people that want to become more involved and just like learn more about it?
Yeah, great question. I'll simplify it into 3 things because, you know, that's my pattern tonight. The first most important thing is to believe people when they tell you who they are. So believe them and do the work of coming to know them better, because one of the coolest things about being a person is that you can change. So to believe people that they can change, that they know who they are when they change is just really key. So use people's name and pronouns, ask, don't make assumptions, and, you know, in general, don't make it about you if you do make a mistake. So believe people who they are. Number 2, like read, you know, there's lots of like really great articles and stats, and you can visit our website at gipton.co, learn a lot of stuff. Just get a little bit more informed. It's not scary, you know, we're not like something totally unknowable. Just a little bit of education can go a long way. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, if you have the ability, like donate. Like there's a lot of people who are out and who need care. It's an incredibly marginalized community in many ways. And think about where you put your dollars in that way. There's plenty of great organizations that could use that support.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. John, thanks so much for your conversation earlier. One thing that stood out to me was how you're able to advocate and show increasing the amount of diversity headcount and LGBTQ people will drive more revenue and kind of improve your business. What advice do you have for people, like even on the younger side, just entering in like the MBA program to advocate for more LGBTQ headcount? Because you really never know with these managers, like what they prefer, and just kind of advocating for, hey, we need more diversity in this workforce.
I think it's a good question. And again, it depends on who you're speaking to and tailoring kind of the advocacy to your audience. But what I will say, and the important point about economics is, it doesn't matter your politics, it doesn't matter your culture, it doesn't matter your religion. Everyone with whom you're speaking understands the bottom line. And if you can capture that in the number, it may not resonate if someone says, oh, $5 trillion in the LGBT global marketplace. But what will resonate with a manager is how frustrated they get with turnover and lack of retention, or people always being out or not focused, and the positives from productivity and engagement, and getting people at the rank and file or the managerial level to come to appreciate that allowing people to be themselves as a manager, which is probably consistent with your policy, is going to yield something for them and in terms of the bottom line, and being able to accept you, like, that's okay. Whatever motivates them, if we all get to the same place, then just be happy we're getting there and not get so caught up in how they got there or what's motivating them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's some really great advice, and I really kind of appreciate it. And one of the things that resonated with me a lot throughout your conversation was kind of throughout your time when you face this adversity and you're like, how gay do I want to be? Like, how out should I be kind of on this gay meter? And for you that work with a bunch of different clients that come from different backgrounds, geographically, demographically, how do you get like a better understanding of their background to understand, like, should I be like this far out? Should I be this far out? Like, what should I include about my background? Just understanding more about like what part of me would be the best, because you want to show yourself, but at the same time, it's like business is important as well.
Well, I think it's challenging, right, from an employment law perspective. Of course, when you're interviewing, there's all the questions that you should not be asking. There's all the questions that make us unique because we transcend every other protected group, and you're only as out as you want to be. So whether or not you're counted, there's this whole space in the LGBT community that isn't as clear sometimes as other particular groups. But I think it goes back to your point about situational awareness. It's like how you pay attention to cues. It's the same way if you go over to, somebody's, something as simple as somebody's house and you pay attention to what they like so you can write a nice thank you note or bring a hostess gift. And I get in trouble for never writing thank you notes, but I always send a nice gift. The point is like, you're aware on a larger scale. I look in offices, I look at pictures, I see where they went to school, I look at where their kids have gone to school. You pay attention to comments that they made, what they majored in, like find ways to connect with people and show that you have something in common and focus on that commonality, but it requires situational awareness. And unfortunately, like in our community, sometimes that awareness means putting your guard up to stay safe. And there can be a time and place for everything. And the fact that, how out you are, I guess my only last message would be, but I'm never lying and I'm never affirmatively saying I'm not. I may be omitting, but I'm using my best judgment in the conversation. But I'm always myself when asked and when on paper.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice about situational awareness and just knowing like who's in front of me and kind of what's all going around, and yeah, feeling comfortable just being yourself. So I really appreciate that and everything that you just said. It's been taking down my notes on here, so definitely trying to remember everything. Thank you so much. And then Julie, like your talk was like so inspirational, and just like having a storyteller, like that's so special, and that you're able to leverage your strengths in consulting coming from this very untraditional career path. And I know that out here in the crowd, we probably have a lot of people that are pursuing consulting. And I was kind of curious for you, like, how did you leverage like your strengths that are a little bit untraditional, unconventional to make a difference in a technical field?
You mean in terms of like entry, how to do it within the consulting world?
Yeah, like just entering with a very like untraditional background. Like it's not like hard maths and science going into something like consulting that can be very data driven.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously a part of that is business school. One would hope you learned something in business school. So I went to Chicago Booth, which had a lot of, data-driven classes. And so for me, that was part of what I was trying to balance out, as I wanted to be able to say, like, I'm hardcore, right? Yes, I was a musician, but I'm also hardcore in the other ways. And I think that was also a big piece of why going into consulting was something that I thought was important for me, because I really did need that sort of stamp of approval. And I knew that, I started thinking about getting out of music in 2008, which was not a great time to be looking for a job, as you can imagine. And I literally couldn't get, I graduated, magna cum laude from NYU undergrad, and I could not get an interview even for a receptionist job. I got nothing. And so I knew that if I didn't have like the right business school stamp and, the next career stamp on my resume, I wouldn't be able to do anything else going forward. I mean, fortunately, the way that this part of, or this kind of mechanism of business school and the kinds of companies that do recruit at business schools, a lot of them are looking for potential. And I think a lot of it is about just what do you do with that potential. And particularly consulting firms, a lot of them, including Deloitte, which I know is a sponsor tonight, which is so great. They provide a lot of training as well about how to reframe how you think and tear apart a problem. And so, I think everybody probably has some way that some superpower that they bring to that makes them, effective in their own way. But having that toolkit, I think, really sets you up well for anything else that you'd want to do. So to me, that was a really helpful journey to go on, because it really did set me up with a really well-rounded foundation to be able to then go off and do other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible how you were able to like leverage your strengths, but then also like keep your ears and eyes open for like really where you could kind of improve and where there were those gaps. And it's great that you and so many of us like came to business school to really kind of fill in those gaps. And so I really appreciate that, and definitely like trying to do the same as well. So thank you so much for that. So everybody, that kind of concludes our session for the night. We really kind of want to thank all of our speakers, Sultan, John, and Julie, for doing such an incredible job tonight. I was so inspired with everything tonight. So thank you so much. And thank you, Deloitte, obviously, for sponsoring as well. My name is Matt Gates, and I'm the second year. You can probably expect at UT Macomb, so hook 'em. And just thank you guys so much for kind of attending everything tonight. Please let me know as one of the student organizers if you guys have any advice or feedback or any questions. Happy to help. One thing, last thing to remember is that we do have the Sherry Vine drag show. It's coming up in 30 minutes. We're all incredibly excited for that. So you can find the link on the agenda. We will also be posting in the chat. So feel free to grab a glass of wine, just kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. And thank you so much for being with us tonight. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening and stay safe out there.